Welcome, guys, to Evolve. I am your host, Monette Brann-Natta. I'm so happy to be here with you again this week and that you've tuned in and that you're listening and exchanging some energy. Last week, as I was preparing for the show, the idea of the beautiful way in which the great indigenous people of our country floated up into my spirit. And I saw them with their quiet strength, the wisdom of Mother Earth cradled in their bosoms. And I spoke to you about synchronicity and how they happened to tap into it long before anyone was there to teach them. They knew about this concept without being told. They were listening. And they were aware of not only their intuitions, but the animal totems that were always around them. Well, as synchronicity and fate would have it, 2 days after that show aired, a majestic and fortuitous event occurred. This magical thing happened amid the increasing unrest and volatility that has been unfurling in regards to the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. What's been going on is that these people have been standing in opposition to the Dakota Access Pipeline, which is a $3.7 billion investment to move so much oil, many barrels of domestic crude of oil a day through 4 states. And I'm not saying we don't need oil, but I'm saying there are ways that we can figure out how to do this. So these people are out there. They're standing up against what they see as corporate greed and an environmental threat and assault on what they think is a sacred land. And they're demonstrating, and that demonstration has become their daily beloved work. And journalists were out there, and they're documenting them in the midst of this precious work that they're doing every day, standing up for Mother Earth. And with each shot and interview, these journalists, from Amy Goodman to many others, captured the accompanying brutality that was going on of the indigenous people and the allies, because people, guys, are coming from all over the world, not just our country, not just the Dakotas, all over the world to stand in solidarity with the Sioux Reservation. And that's when it happened. This journalist is interviewing one of the indigenous people, and he's saying, it's not right. They don't understand. We're not just doing this for us. This isn't a selfish endeavor. This is something we're doing for them. This is something we're doing for Earth. And just then, in the distance, a cloud of dust rose, and sweeping over the hill emerged a herd of what the Sioux people call Tatanka, or buffalo. Their hooves were beating the plains like 10,000 timpanis. And as a band nerd, that's a beautiful sound. And as you can imagine, it was a sweet sound to the indigenous culture who honor these bison. And they call them a nation. They call them the Tatanka Ioti, or Buffalo Nation, which is a symbol of sacrifice to them, as the bison give their lives to provide food, shelter, and clothing. And through the use of their meat, they help keep these people alive. It's what sustained them for hundreds of years. They maintain this spiritual tradition with the bison, believing that as long as the buffalo are allowed to roam, and they believe that the buffalo are a great gift from the Great Spirit. So as long as they're roaming free and the herds are bountiful, the sovereignty of the indigenous people will remain strong. In the midst of these mass arrests and mace attacks and beatings from batons, something that harkens back to the civil rights movements of the 1960s, which has just absolutely been chilling to me to watch this happen again in 2016. In the midst of all of that chaos, a stampede of these bison suddenly appear near the Standing Rock protest camp. These brave Native Americans have been attempting to stop this pipeline, okay, guys? They just don't want it built on their land. And in the midst of this, when all hope is gone, and judges have passed orders for buildings to happen, and then President Obama stepped in and he said no, and now it's being litigated once more. In the midst of this, this herd of buffalo emerges. And let me tell you, when they appeared, a great rally cry erupted. And a nation of Sioux and those allies I told you about knew that it was no coincidence. This message was a synchronistic event. They had been praying, and that's the thing. They'd been talking about it to the reporters and the journalists, but they'd been praying for assistance from the buffalo during their standoff. While the riot police are beating them down and sicking dogs on them, and they're dealing with the combative National Guardsmen, they had been praying. And here it was, bold, it was clear, their prayers had been heard. I got goosebumps, honestly, as I watched the video, not because it seemed impossible, but because it confirmed the great truth of synchronicity. Here I was, talking about this a few days earlier, and talking about the Native American people. And as I'm preparing my lessons, I pray, I meditate, and I ask for guidance, and that floated up. I really believe it was given to me. What a beautiful way. It wasn't given to me just for this reason, but I feel like there's a synchronicity that's always happening. The universe is always listening and always responding. Across the country, just a week later, in a town that I spent many years of my life, another oil-centered calamity literally exploded onto the national news, and it's tucked away in Helena, Alabama. A pipeline exploded as crews were performing maintenance, and it's just regular maintenance, guys. 4 people were injured, and I think now the reports are up to 7, and 1 person lost their life. People were forced to evacuate their quaint suburban homes, and let me tell you, this place is idyllic. It looks like a postcard. It looks like a Thomas Kinkade painting. I've lived there for many years, and it's a beautiful little country town. So people were forced to evacuate their homes. And according to AL.com, this tragedy happened just 5 miles away west of a recent Colonial Pipeline gas leak. Just 5 miles away, they'd already had some rumblings. The earth was already talking to them. Things were already starting to be shaken up. And this just happened very recently before this explosion. One of the signs that struck me when I was researching the site of the Standing Rock protests said this: oil and water don't mix, and humans and oil don't mix. In the wake of this most unfortunate event, some of the Sioux people have been making connections to the Helena, Alabama tragedy. They've been making connections to that situation, and they're saying, this is the reason, the very reason that we are so vehemently protesting. We're trying to protect any more innocent people from succumbing to the inevitable destruction and loss of resources that these good people in Helena, Alabama suffered. What I do know is that our earth is precious, and Mother Earth is often crying out to be heard. Our job is to hear her. Our job is to respect her and each other, and to strive to cohabitate peacefully. So I just want to right now send my thoughts and prayers out to all of the persons injured and the families of all who are involved, and especially to the family of the deceased in Helena. And in Standing Rock, I pray that you stand firm in your convictions. Your cries for justice are being carried on the wind, and your efforts are not in vain. These stories over the past few weeks have turned up a lot of feelings. And feelings, deep running feelings, are the stuff of the moon. And we all know that the moon is primarily responsible for the rising and the falling of ocean tides. But something else important to note here is that our bodies are 60% water. We are like 60% comprised of water. And you may say, what does that have to do with anything, Monette? Well, this is something that I've always said to my clients. It stands to reason that if we are comprised of 60% water, that we would be affected by the energetic force that is so powerful, it pulls the shoreline up like a blanket and tucks in the sand like a nurturing mother. Of course, we're going to be affected by the pull of the moon. And it's the closest planet, guys, to Earth, as you well know. And it literally zips around the zodiac, completing its circuit in less than a month. So because of that, it touches us much more deeply than some of the other planetary involvement. For instance, we will get into a lesson in the future about Saturn returns, which are very important to know about. But that takes 28 and a half years from the time that you're born for that to cycle back into your life. So that's just a contrast and a comparison to how quickly the moon can affect us, because it's coming back around very fast. So it is the ruler of the tides, and it is fitting that it should be the ruler of our emotions. We've all heard these sayings, guys. Still waters run deep, making waves, or she was making waves, or he was making waves. A wellspring of emotion. You see, our emotions have long been portrayed in terms of the sea, fluid and momentous and churning from within. Our mood swings, our instincts, how we feel about things, and how our feelings affect others are all influenced by the moon. Whereas the sun gives us our spirit, that bright, shining spirit we talked about, that first part of the triad, it's the moon that gives us our soul. I mean, that's Blues Brothers, that's James Brown, that's music for me, but also it's the moon. And it's no coincidence that the moon and music are associated as well, because you think about when you're first born, and the thing that really is a comfort and soothing thing to you is that song from your mother. She may be singing to you before you're ever out. And mother is associated with moon and nurture. So all these things are why music has the ability to kind of transcend all kinds of boundaries and cultural boundaries, but also how it helps us soothe. How we sing those lullabies to our children when they're born. How we might even put on a song to help us go through a breakup when we're emotional, or to help us get out of a rut, or to motivate us when we're working out. That's all tied to the moon. The moon is a goddess in that it symbolizes mother, like we just talked about, and the relationship between a woman and a child. This planet speaks to women in the life of the role, the nurturer. It's about fertility, it's about pregnancy, and it's about childbirth. So all of these things are aspected with the moon, or governed by the moon. We see the moon casting its silvery glow from our earliest moments, like I spoke about again. When we are stroked and we're first caressed by our mother, and we're loved and we felt her tender touch, that's all moon stuff, guys. Our emotions have this way of manifesting themselves through our being, and they set the tone for our daily lives. The moon is party to this in all ways and in this continuum, and it renders us a vital one moment and fragile the next. So that means, here we go, we're up and then we're down. We are naughty, we're nice. We may laugh wildly or cry at will. This is all through the moon's energy. We also endeavor through the moon's energy to reconcile these varied emotions. We're always trying to come into balance. We're always trying to find equilibrium. And that's so that we can make ourselves complete and one with the world. The moon also helps us to see what we want, which way we want to go, and to use the memory and our past as part of this process. So one of the ways that we connect with ourselves is to remember that didn't feel so good. That thing that I did before, I didn't like. That kind of hurt. That person hurt me this way. And so we use that as a barometer for what we do in our future selves. That's all part of the moon.